Hello and welcome to the Somersworth Angle. My name is Oliver Drew, and the Somersworth Angle is...
Wait, what's the Somersworth Angle?
I was legit just about to describe what the Somersworth Angle is.
Then explain it.
The Somersworth Angle is a show in which me, Drew Hallett, and Brandon South, the three Swen alums from last year, work on more complex issues than we could cover last year. Longer times and more intricate stories. On our very first show...
What's your first episode gonna be?
I was just about to describe what our first episode...
Cool, so tell me, what's it gonna be? What's it gonna be?
The first episode is gonna be an interview between me and Mr. Shea on the high schooling system and how we as Americans, the whole country, can improve this system. Hello and welcome to the Somersworth Angle. Hello, and we are in the Somersworth Angle studio with the principal here at the Somersworth High School, Mr. Shea, and we are going to be talking about high schools in America and changing them. Is it necessary? You know, what is the rules to that? And so you are a proponent of changing the way the high school system works. Can you tell me a bit about what motivates you to do that?
Well, first, I'm real excited that Somersworth, the community, the school board, our district leadership, the faculty are all very supportive and open-minded about thinking differently about high school. And that's partly Somersworth High School, but it's mostly just high school as we know it. I think many people are aware, but not necessarily everyone. I'm not sure to the degree to which high school students have an appreciation. Obviously, high school students, Oliver, you know high school, you're living it better than I can relate to today. But the history, essentially the basic model of the American high school, how we organize curriculum, the credit system, graduation requirements, the four-year assumption, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, what the facilities look like, that it's generally an environment that is isolated from the real world. It's difficult to connect to the real world in many ways. All of those things go back to really the 1890s, the 1900s, at a time, early 1900s, at a time, 120, 130 years ago, most teenagers didn't go to high school. It was a small percentage of young people, and particularly boys at that time, that went on to high school because they were bound for college. They generally came from families that were landowners and more affluent. And during the Progressive era, it was just a noble effort in the United States to say, hey, wait a minute, a very democratic, noble, egalitarian effort to say, look, more of our kids, maybe all of them, should be going to high school. So we basically, this is the Industrial Revolution era, right? So this is, the factory model. Basically, the system was created at a time when we really knew very little about teaching and learning, and being an educator was hardly even a profession, particularly at the lower grade levels and what would soon become high school as we know it. And we developed a system that was basically driven by cost and by efficiency and scale. And basically in the time of the Industrial Revolution, it created kind of a factory model high school to get as many kids up to and into high school as possible, and through the system and graduating with a high school diploma. And we did. Within 30, 40, 50 years, most American kids were going to high school and graduating from high school, and now we're up over 90%, which is terrific. But unfortunately, we created a system that's not really about teaching and learning. And it was tolerable and sufficient maybe in a different era, but given how much the world has changed, particularly in the last 20, 30, 40 years, the technological revolution is part of that, globalization is part of that, the world of work is part of that. It's no longer tolerable or sufficient. It was never a good system. And don't get me wrong, it's not about teachers good things happen in high school today at Somersworth High School and other places, but it's largely despite the system, not because of the system. Because we have good teachers working hard within these parameters, you have kids working hard within these parameters, parents that are supportive of their kids' education. We're doing our best to pull out of it what we can. But why not have a system in place that cultivates and demands powerful teaching and learning rather than one that gets in the way of it?
I know exactly how you feel because I'm one of the kids who goes to high school, and I have felt that before. Like, you go in there and you're learning, but you feel like you aren't learning, and I totally agree with that. And 2 years ago, or last year actually, I decided to join a program inside of my school that was only allowed to be undertaken in my school because of the previous programs, like terrible, like it wasn't doing well.
Yep.
So there's this alternative program in my school, and it had so many more dropouts and so many more people like just going in it and then like getting out of school because they couldn't do it. They felt like they couldn't do school. And my teacher, Miss England, Jennifer England, started this program called Multiple Pathways, and she started by just having a bunch of teachers there, and the teachers had to be emotionally healthy and had to be there for the students and were able to provide different pathways to learning. Like, there's no homework in MP. And I joined that program, and I have skyrocketed in my actual learning. And I think I do identify with that. Like, it works because it is kind of against the normal school rules as opposed to it being, in alignment with the way schools are normally built. And how do you foresee school changing in these upcoming years?
I would say quickly, the sadly ironic thing, is that oftentimes some of the best alternative programs for students that have struggled to find success in traditional high schools, the things they do, flexible learning environments to kind of match the needs of a student, oftentimes much more student control over the things that we're studying and how we're studying them, the pace, whatever makes sense for the student, rather than boom, 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 this is the pace everybody should be going. Oftentimes, much more significant real-world application, much more hands-on doing kind of stuff. Those are the things all high school students should be doing more of, not just the students who have said, I've had enough of the traditional system, or I'm struggling so hard to kind of make this work for me. Those are the things all students should need. Those are oftentimes the things our best institutions of higher education are doing: application, problem solving, real world stuff, greater flexibility, and depth of learning over breadth. Rather than 32 chapters of biology, let's focus on the key concepts so they actually stick. So in terms of my convictions, and I'm not alone in this, I think maybe 20 or 30 years ago, the number of educators that were really thinking hard about tipping the apple cart, so to speak, that we really need to kind of think harder about the whole system, was limited in number. We may still be in a minority, but we're a pretty significant minority at this point. Let's take instructional practice, for example. The fundamental model was about, you, Oliver, just sit there and behave and take good notes, and I will teach you, I will deliver, all the information is going to come from me to you, and you're just going to kind of devour it all, study, memorize it, do well on a test, and largely forget a significant part of it. That was kind of the fundamental idea of the Industrial Revolution high school. We've come a long way from that, and we were trying to do what I would call delivery much better. I'm going to teach it to you, but you're going to be engaged, you're going to be up at the board, we're going to be in small groups, I'm going to give you some things to work with, we're going to watch a short video, I'm going to ask you to present a little bit about it. But let's say we're studying World War II. If I've done all of those things, and basically I've said these are the 4 reasons World War II happened, and I'm teaching you the implications of World War II in Europe and the rest of the world shortly after the war and today, what we need more of is, that's good, and you're more likely to remember it, but you haven't learned how to learn, and you're not learning how to think until I actually pose it to you, Oliver, why did World War II happen? So we're studying it, we're looking at it in context, but now you're grappling with it. It's sort of like an English literature class taught well. You don't have a teacher lecture to you what the meaning of The Great Gatsby was. You talk about it with other students and come to your own conclusions about what the lessons are there. We need more of that in our instructional practice. It's a more powerful way to learn, but the thing that's really critical is it prepares you to go off, whether that's to higher education or definitely to work, find meaningful, fulfilling work. You need to be able to think. somebody's not going to be consistently giving you, here's the 4 things you need to know, or this. You need to solve problems. Especially for the careers that are going to be most fulfilling, and probably most lucrative in terms of being able to take care of yourself and potentially a family down the road and all that. It's the critical thinking piece that is huge. So that's an example of how instructional practice needs to shift a little bit. And the thing to remember is it's not a more efficient way to teach or run a school or learn. It's a better way. So you have to think harder about, you can't teach that way, you can't run a class that way with 30 kids in a classroom. You need smaller classes. You need teachers collaborating outside of classes. You need co-teachers in some environments, so both a science perspective and a social studies perspective as you're tackling a question. And you need to do less. Fewer things with more depth. The law school metaphor is a good one. You don't go to, they often said, you don't go to law school to learn the law, because there's too much law to learn in 3 years. You go to law school to learn how to think like a lawyer, because you can always look up the law. That's kind of where we are with high school as well. There are things that are important, but you need to learn to think more than anything.
Okay, and how do you how has the school system, before this established school system, the kind of system we all believe in America, has really chosen to use as a way to teach kids and get them ready for either college or for work or for wherever they're going in life? How do you think it has helped and hurt people growing up through the system?
If you go back to let's go back to the 1950s, very different economy in the United States. And as I said a couple minutes ago, I don't think this was ever a good system. It's just that in a different time, it was tolerable. So if in the 1950s you went and you got a high school diploma, and you could read, you could write, you weren't necessarily being trained to think or be creative, but you basically went to high school and you learned to do your work, show up on time, be responsible, listen and follow instructions. You could go from high school and get a job and make a decent living, and what happy is up to individuals to decide for themselves, but it appeared you'd be all right. And so arguably, and then folks that wanted more went off to college and found other ways to kind of pursue more creative entrepreneurial work. So arguably there wasn't that much harm done by the system then. A system today that is still largely focused on training folks to take instructions and work on an assembly line kind of job. For the most part, those jobs have disappeared and are continuing to disappear. Nobody really has an accurate sense for where the economy is going to be in 10, 20, or 30 years. A lot of work that was considered to require less training still exists and probably will continue to exist. I think most of the more meaningful work and fulfilling work, the kind of job where you don't come home tired and just another lousy day, and if I could stop doing this tomorrow, I would, but I need the money. I want high school graduates that are doing things they care about, that they feel passionate about, that they find fulfillment in, and those kinds of careers and that kind of work generally requires the ability to think creatively, to solve problems, to be flexible. 70 years ago, it was not unusual for somebody to graduate from high school and with or without college get a job and work in that job for 40, 45 years. They might change employers once or twice, but they didn't change careers. Now the statistics on the degree to which our current 20-somethings, let alone high school students now that are a little further out, changing jobs and careers is much more frequent. And we're not sure how it's going to play out. So adaptability, flexibility, yeah, you still got to be responsible, you still have to have a work ethic, but it's not enough to have just plowed through a lot of chapters of science. It's more importantly, you're kind of posing problems. You're part of a class that's kind of grappling with global climate change without any assumptions. What is happening in the climate? What do we know? What do we not know? What are its implications? Looking at the science and everything else around human activities' effect on that. What are the risks? Where is it headed? That's the powerful stuff. as an example.
So yeah, and you see school heading in a more, oh, we have to not only read this and not only like do this work, but also understand it, and how do you think that really is gonna, like, those lessons are gonna affect our youth compared to the generations before?
I would argue that on a large scale, we are doomed if we don't get this right. And as a high school principal, this is going to sound like I'm a little too fixated on the kind of work that I am doing or I am part of, but I would suggest there may not be anything more important on the planet. I don't know if I'm right about this, but it's a suggestion. There may not be anything more important on the planet than getting high school right. Because kindergarten through 8th grade, you're learning the basics, you're socializing, those years are absolutely critical, don't get me wrong. But high school is the time you go from being an adolescent to a young adult. And it's the only time we're all in school together, because after high school people go a whole lot of different directions. But if we look at getting that system right, and to me that's partly just creating an environment in which young people find character and integrity and honesty and compassion to be virtues that they care about. And we give them a smaller base of real knowledge and skills rather than trying to cover everything. And more than anything, give them the skills and the inspiration to really be problem solvers and people that will pose interesting questions, people that will tackle interesting questions. That, I think, it's the key to our democracy, it's the key to our economy, it's the key to our environment, it's the key to figuring out healthcare. Good people that can solve problems and care. And boy, isn't high school the place to get that right?
Yeah, I think
If
so.
not high school, where?
Yeah.
Sure, family, church, other places, but high school is where all of our young people are.
Yeah, and I'll just say, as a person who's young and in high school, I'm thankful that I have adults, and we have adults that, like you, are posing questions to the system and are willing to tweak it or at least question it, because I haven't questioned it, and that's something where it's like, if I haven't questioned it, I have to question why I haven't questioned it in the first place. So thank you for that.
And most high school students I've talked to in the last 5, 10, 15 years since I've been kind of engaged in this endeavor haven't, and that's all right. High school students question and think hard about a lot of things, but by the time you get to be in your second year of high school, you're just sort of kind of getting comfortable with the whole thing. You're finding degrees of success in it, or in some cases you're not. And maybe by your third year of high school, your junior year of high school, then you're starting to think about, if you devote the time to it, or you're in a teacher prep program like we have at the CTC here at Somersworth High School, then you think hard about it. But otherwise, you're just kind of getting through it, and your hard thinking is in your English classes and in your history classes and other places. So that's not unusual. But I would be thrilled, and I've mentioned this 3 out of the 4 class meetings that we've had. I haven't had a chance to meet with the 9th graders yet. And the seniors are pretty close to graduation, but particularly with the juniors and the sophomores, I really stress that I'm hoping that we can get some meaningful involvement. Because it kind of takes a couple hours of time and energy just to kind of get up to speed on it. It's kind of like, a Netflix series. You kind of you got to know who all the characters are. You got to devote some time to it before you kind of know what's going on. You can really contribute. I'm hoping we can have some real meaningful student voice in that as we move forward, community as well.
Well, I'm hoping for that too, and thank you for joining us on the Somersworth Angle conversation interview thing that we just did. Thank you.
Thanks, Aliya. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for watching the very first episode of the Somersworth Angle. My name is Oliver Drew, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. There will be many more to come. Stay tuned, please.